Oh, g'day everybody. How good is this grand final week for season 2022? We have our teams. They are in. We know who's playing. We know who's turning out for each of the teams, the Penrith Panthers and the Parramatta Eels. And the regular team is here as per usual. I'm talking about Tristan Merlehan. He is the number one seed up there at topsport.com.au, home of the best multi. And, of course, Gerard Condon from readingtheplay.com.au. It's like, what is it? Disneyland for adults, Tristan.
It most certainly is. And I've had a fantastic week. The Panthers have got into the grand final. I've run a campaign similar to Seed of Power. Seed of Power had a nice win on the weekend, which we've tipped on here a few times in about its 15th run in this preparation. And I've managed to lob 3 lunch bets. It's only taken 30 weeks to get 2 collects on a weekend. But yeah, I wish we could replay that type of week after week. But no, it's a great week, guys, with NRL, the grand final. Obviously, it's going to be it's a massive rivalry, these two teams anyway. And obviously, Penrith's been the form side all year. Parramatta have beaten them twice, so it adds a bit of a storyline there. So there's going to be a lot of things to talk about over the next half an hour or so.
Well, the really good thing, Jimmy, at this stage is that we don't replay the audios or some of the emails or text messages that come in about Seed of Power running around last Saturday. But you didn't know it was in. I didn't know it in. I don't think Tristan actually knew it was in until Saturday morning. And there it is, lobbing on the outside. He is a gutsy horse. It's been going around in circles week after week and just keeps collecting. But that was Saturday. What about the football Friday night? What about the football Saturday night? We'll get into that. And gee, it really does stack up as a grand final for the ages, doesn't it? When you've got the Eels, who haven't won for 36 years, and it might have been nearly 36 years since they were last there, and in against their Western arch rivals and the Panthers, who turn up for the 3rd time in a row. The Eels have had a 24-hour march on getting grand final tickets. They must have at least 50,000 somewhere in the stands come Sunday afternoon. It's just going to be an amazing sea of gold and blue and black, and just an amazing vocal crowd.
Yeah, hottest ticket in town, isn't it? Sold out very, very quickly as soon as the allocation was put up for sale. So always a good sign. We knew it was going to be like that. The split of supporters will be really interesting as well. If you are listening to the podcast, we encourage you to keep doing it. You can subscribe at Whooshka, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. You can tune in via YouTube as well. We like to go back before we go forward. So there was about 3 lunch bets from last week. I think I had a -2 +1 for a net score -1. I think you were the same, Gerard, which means you had an outstanding week, as you say, Tristan. $50 in each throw there. So do we have an update, Tristan, on our Pass It On clothing now that we've kicked over into the new financial year for them?
Yeah, we absolutely do. And when you say, Jimmy, you think I absolutely know that we had 3 collects there in my record book. It's the only week I've known exactly what the numbers are all season. But 512 we've got in the kitty. So it's starting to take nice shape, and really good to be able to get a few little bets rolling along, because obviously we made a nice little donation there a week or so ago.
$23,500 to Pass It On clothing. Chris and Olga and the team. So, well done on that one.
And I will say, Tristan, you were very modest over the weekend, because Jimmy got 1 win, and we've seen more gifts jumping out than a social media manager. And Tristan's ended up with 3 from 3 over the weekend, and just quietly meandered through and said, gentlemen, I'll take that.
Well, as we said on the radio today, Jimmy, if Gutho scores a try at 40-0 down to get it to 40-6, so I don't think he'll be doing the Guth Arena. It's a bit hard for me to be doing the Guth Arena or anything of the like when you're coming from a fair way back over the course of the season. But it was certainly nice to get a little bit of momentum there. As
the great tennis player, the contemporary of Bjorn Borg, said after finally breaking his losing streak against him, nobody beats Vitas Gerulaitis 17 times in a row. So. There we go. Hey, we've got to go back and have a look at what happened last week. Get your thoughts on those games before we get to the market itself. But Tristan, I think the Cowboys will spend the next 3 months thinking about the one that got away for them. To lead by 8 at home in those conditions, in front of that crowd, against that team and get beaten, I think that's going to burn Todd Payten and his men.
Oh, absolutely. And, and obviously we'll talk about a few of the other things that occurred throughout the game. But yeah, despite the fact that maybe there'd be some contentious tries or no tries, they had the game there to be won, and they were in a position where they, at home, you would have liked to have thought they could have gone away with it, but it certainly wasn't to be. And then, yeah, they'll be very disappointed. And, they've got a lot of young kids on that side, so I'm sure they'll continue with this journey and this path forward. But, geez, it's hard to get a home final there in a big stage, and you'd like to be able to take advantage of it when you're in that position.
And Tristan, that's the key point. I coached for 16 years. If you get to a prelim, let alone a grand final, it's damn hard work. It's a long season to absolutely bottle it, in my opinion, like the Cowboys did. It's going to sting a long time. Now, a lot of people say they've had an outstanding year. People expected them to be in the bottom 4, let's praise them for all of that. Absolutely. But they were at home. They started well. In my opinion, the yardage was soft. They dominated every key metric around the yardage, the post-contact meters. They had 77 tackles in the Eels' own half, and of those, they had 34 of them in the red zone. Yet they tried to go around them. They didn't try and open them up and go through them. I thought they played a really conservative style that hasn't been the mantra of how they've tried to play this year. And then to absolutely make that worse, 2 of the tries that the Eels scored were incredibly soft. So they absolutely blew it. I think they choked when it mattered. The Eels have to take some positive out of that, because they still defended so much of that opportunity on their back end and scrambled at times that getting on that plane coming home from Townsville, they would have been patting each other on the back saying, we got that done. We absolutely worked hard. The little niggle there for mine is that they still let through 20 points. We go into Saturday night. I guess it probably unfolded how we expected. I mean, the Rabbits got out to a 12-0 lead, but you just never thought that they were that comfortable in front. They murdered 3 opportunities going in the half-time too, which cost them tries. They go in at 12-all. You could just see Penrith building, and they're just like a really good car that just keep coming up through the gears as they build momentum. And, Jimmy, the analyst, has been saying it for many weeks, and he said it again on your show yesterday. They are the best second half team in the competition. The way that they just grow and grow into that second half and then put the game away. I mean, they went from down 12-0 to score 32 points. Graham Annesley has now admitted that there were 2 tries that were disallowed that should have been. I think there's another one that was questionable. It could have been a major second half blowout.
There's a real false economy they were living in, weren't they, the South Sydney Rabbitohs? Everything, and I mean everything, went their way in that first 20 to 25 minutes, to the point where it's really interesting, this selection that Ivan Cleary has done, with Mitch Kenny starting the game and Api Coruscant, and Anthony Seibold explains it. Okay, you don't have the extra interchange, and I totally understand that, but geez, they just look clunky with Kenny at dummy half. I know he offers other things defensively, but I thought as soon as Appy got on there, I think there was a real flow that came to the game, and no surprise to see that lack of game management, and it probably falls on Ilias. I know there's more senior players like Latrell Mitchell and Cody Walker, but to not know what the situation of the game is, to look for that field goal late in that first half, I thought that was a slight against the shot callers for the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Just going back to Friday, any concern, Tristan, in your mind? I said it earlier. Ivan Cleary, if you said, Ivan, how do you want your team to be physically, mentally and emotionally going into the grand final? You'd say, well, like they are now. Like they're rested, they're fresh, they're injury-free to a degree with Taylor May, but everything's right to go. Like you couldn't have timed it any better. Parramatta, not so sure. Tough road that they've had, and also how physical that game was on Friday for them. I know they get the extra day.
Oh, for sure. Like as a Panthers fan, I was a little bit worried about them being vulnerable with that, that week off they had against the Cowboys in the last weekend of the season. then obviously the week off in week 2 of the finals. And, I was a little bit worried that they might get jumped early, which they absolutely did by the Bunnies. And they were a bit rusty, and they had a few tries that you had that feeling when it was 12-0 and they'd had 2 or 3 tries ruled against them that were the right calls, but they were very, very unlucky. You thought, this could be the opportunity for South, but then Penrith just came home over the top, and you just get the feeling that those couple of weeks now that they've had off are going to be their absolute perfect scenario for the Panthers going into this game. They're going to be absolutely primed. They could not have timed their run any better. They obviously had to get there first, but now they're there. You couldn't be in a happier frame of mind. And the Eels have had to do it the hard way. They've obviously had it's not just the finals that they've had to work for every game. Let's not forget they had to beat Melbourne in the last weekend of the season. They had a tough game a couple of weekends before as well. They've had a really, really tough run, which is obviously going to have them up and about for this match. But are they just going to run out of legs at the wrong time? But they're there, and I'm sure 14 other teams in the comp would be very willing to swap spots with Parramatta right now.
Well, and that's the key point about the Eels. Only 3 teams, by my reckoning, have actually come from 4th spot to get to the grand final. And each of those 3 teams didn't play week after week and didn't have a defensive record of leaking 20 points a week. So there's 2 key things that's really up against them into this. And that battle hardness of having to work damn bloody hard each week. I think they've had a couple of soft games against the Raiders was one. But, they've still got to punch those minutes out every week and then be there this weekend. The Panthers, I said, leading into week 1 when they were at home against the Eels, and, there's a little bit of talk around, that this is the right Eels team to get them at Penrith Park. Ivan Cleary just keeps timing their preparation so well. He has them so finely tuned, ready to go. I thought he mastered half-time last week. I, like you, Jimmy, I don't really like the change at 9 or the length of minutes that Kenny plays. But who am I to criticise what Ivan's doing at the moment? He's in his 3rd grand final. He's just got them ready to go. They're $1.35 favourites. I think they should be $1.27. They just look fine-tuned to the moment.
If we say, okay, the selection's there with Charlie Staines in, we're all sort of okay with that. What about the Parramatta Eels selections? What's your thoughts there, Jared? I look at it and think, okay, I'd have had Nathan Brown in 6 weeks ago, whenever he was ready. And some of the quotes is like, why now? Why is he the right player now? But 3 weeks ago against Penrith, at Penrith, he wasn't the right player. I'm confused by that.
Oh, and totally confusing, Jimmy, because I agree with you on both points. One is he should have been playing 6 or 8 weeks ago and got minutes and yardage into his body and match fitness into his body ready for this moment. And secondly, if you're going to say this is now the right week, well, so was week 1. Yeah, they needed a physical man, and a week prior against the Storm. Now, they ended up dusting up the Storm, but that was the right game to be playing Nathan Brown and getting that physical contest into him. To now try and justify it, I think he's trying to cover over the tracks about some of the other stuff that's going on in the media that's pointing that finger. I thought Simonson actually handled centre very well last week. I thought he defended very well. I still don't think Wagga Blake has seen enough high ball that he should have in the last 2 weeks. And again, I was just dumbfounded at Townsend's kicking game in the second half. He just kept kicking to the opposite corner and just kept doing it play after play. Yet in the first half, they actually found out Wagga Blake. Listen, Nathan Cleary is going to give him an absolute headache of high ball, and that, I'm sure, is going to be a turning moment during the course of that first half and create an enormous amount of pressure. I thought the other thing that the Eels did do well against the Rabbits did do well against the Panthers, and it opens the door for the Eels here, was they found some joy down that left edge. And Martin and Crichton at times, and that combination got exposed a little bit. And the Rabbits kept going back there with either 3/4 width or short edge plays and finding opportunity. Well, Dylan Brown and Lane, they've got a great combination down that left edge. They've been in fantastic form. They've got to play a lot of football down there.
Sivo, the option going head-to-head with Charlie Staines too, brings back reminiscence of the Gundagai Tigers taking on the Junee Diesels about 5 years ago in the Group 9 grand final when Micah Sivo was on the wing for the Tigers. Very tough afternoon for the Junee Diesels.
He would have got first try and 5 tries in the game, wouldn't he, Jimmy?
Ridiculous. I want to ask you this, and I ask it in all seriousness. Is Ashley Klein a factor? Tristan, do you see that ever at all? Do you see, do you look at that and say, all right, he's going to referee this style of game? It might be overs and unders comes down a little.
Oh, absolutely. You factor in every bit of information when you're setting a market, and we have seen a move towards the unders on the back of a number of things. And it's not just us factoring in it. It's punters shape markets as well. And obviously there's been a bit of downward pressure. The weather probably doesn't look like that's a factor. So there has to be another reason. So yeah, it certainly does have an impact in all aspects of that. And yeah, I certainly agree with that.
Well, Jimmy, he's going to keep them closer together. I think the game's going to end up seeing points, and we'll touch on that in a moment. And he was the obvious. It was never, ever going to go to Atkins, in my personal opinion, because I think that there's a bit of legacy around the fact of when Atkins has done the Penrith games over the last couple of years, and the NRL were just not going to go down that path for a grand final. So as long as Penrith were at the pointy end as they have been, it was then only ever going to be Atkins or Gerard Sutton. And I think Gerard Sutton probably has been a few lengths behind Klein coming into the final last couple of weeks. So for mine, weeks ago, you could have had as much money as you like on the fact that Klein was going to do it. The NRL have to look at this whole bunker issue that we've been talking about for many weeks in the off season and try and make some decisions around how they clear this up. I mean, if a bunker can rule on somebody tapping somebody on the head or something that happened at a back play, surely now with the camera angles they can bring into play ruling on a forward pass. I mean, that's just a no-brainer. We should not have seen what unfolded in, that first 10 minutes against the Cowboys. And then we saw the next night 2 tries that for all money should have been 2 tries that were declined by the bunker. We should not have been talking about that this week. And let's hope that we end up with a grand final this weekend where there's none of that and the players are able to just get out there and settle a score and decide what unfolds.
I was listening to someone, I'm trying to think who it was talking about how Parramatta beat Penrith, right? And one of the ways they talked about was second phase play. It might have been Anthony Seibold. And he's talking about second phase play and then shift 2 passes so that not only do you make them make an extra tackle, then you make them move as well. And so what you're trying to do is bring fatigue into the defensive line of Penrith, which is really hard to do. But they do play this really fast-moving defensive line. So it is tough to do physically. And in my mind, I'm thinking that's all well and good. But if something happens where there's a bunker interference, then all that work that you've done there is completely evaporated, because for these guys at that level, getting a 5-second break as opposed to a 30-second break, as opposed to a minute break, as opposed to a 2-minute break, changes things from a recovery point of view completely.
Yep.
And that's where the game's really struggling with itself at the moment. It's a much bigger issue than this grand final this week. And that is, when does fatigue come into the game for these players? Because the more fatigue we see, the more entertaining the football, in my mind.
Well, Jimmy, the other thing you got to do if you're going to beat Penrith, and Parramatta have done this earlier in the season, you have to stay in their face early in defence and physically, but you've just got to give them nothing with error. Now, that's where the Rabbits brought themselves undone last week. The Rabbits actually went with them early and were playing to them and in their face, but then started to chance their arm a little bit, a couple of key turnovers, and the game just starts to flip, the momentum flips. Penrith just eat that stuff for breakfast.
Yeah. All right, lads, let's get into it. Tristan, the market itself, there's been a little bit of tightening, I think, a little money around for the Panthers. Where's it sit right now?
Yeah, so it sits at the moment as $1.35 Penrith, $3.25 Parramatta, 8.5 the line. So we pushed the market out literally as soon as the final whistle was blown on the South Sydney game. And at that point, there was, in my view, some concern for Viliami Kikau and even Jerome Luai, and we did price it up at probably what I felt was a higher price than what you would normally price that game up as. obviously since they both subsequently got off and, there's no massive serious injury news that's completely unexpected, the Panthers have tightened up a little bit. I probably agree with Gerard that maybe the Panthers are still a touch overs, but in a game like this, when you've got a very firm favourite in the final, there is always a bit of pushback on the other side, because a lot of punters will try to position themselves into a spot where they can't lose and back the other side in the match. So that probably has some impact. Although in saying that, I thought that might have been the case with the Swans Geelong game in the AFL, but the market early in the week definitely pushed for Geelong, but there was a bit of a push for the Swannies at the plus. So it'll be interesting if that holds true in the NRL version of the grand final.
I'm surprised about the market. I expected it to be closer to 10 when the first numbers went up off the game. And the fact that it ended up at 7.5, it's now 8.5. It did surprise me. And it sat there at 7.5 for a couple of days. There's certainly been the move since. I mean, as I suggested earlier, Jimmy, I was somewhere around $1.27. I thought the market was somewhere around 10. I can be higher, but that's where I expected the market to be. And it's Penrith there to roll out the way that we expect as the benchmark with that defensive position. And I think that that's where the market is built in.
Yeah, I get the sense that, the factor that kept it that little bit closer or Penrith at a bit better price was the 2 wins that Parramatta have had over them during the course of this year. And the first one at Penrith was a really good win, but they didn't play well on the night. They hung in there, and they got it at the end, right? So fair play to them. They win the game. There's an element of a question mark over what they did in the absence. I thought they were well and truly on top when Nathan Cleary was sent off the field in that round 20 clash. But the other thing, they came out a 12-man Panthers side in the second half, and it was 6-4. They won the second half. So all those things go into the mix with that. And I think that's probably why your price or the price is not where a lot of people anticipate it.
And Jimmy, just talking about favourites in grand finals, right? If we look at the last 14 NRL grand finals, 9 of those 14 have been not only won by the favourite, but the favourite has covered the line. 9 out of 14. I mean, we're talking a really high number here. That's the best part of 75, 80%. So what that's also suggesting is that the market has been accurate in forecasting what they expected and then the outcome, but also the gap between them and then the favourite covering the gap. And I think that's about where the market expects that with that week off, with the less football, that the Panthers then have the advantage. I like the fact around the Eels, though, that they just are flying under the radar and they just don't have this expectation, because there was all that talk and media focus and carry on about week 1 and week 2 of the finals and could they get past that, and under Arthur that it was a poor record and all of that. Well, they shook all of that when they got through week 2. Then they get to week 3 and go to Townsville where they weren't expected to win. And for whatever reason, they get back on the plane coming home going into a grand final. So now there's just none of that expectation. If they get beat on Monday, we'll all be saying, well, that's probably what we expected. Now, those sorts of teams can be sneaky dangerous in the grand final because they just need a little bit of a sniff early and start to play with a little bit of football and a little bit of confidence. And they got 40 or 50,000 people in the stands that haven't seen success in a grand final for a long time. That sort of stuff can really take you a long way.
They should feel like they're playing with house money, shouldn't they? Like that should be the mentality. Just on that, 9 out of 14 is 64%. You haven't got any term deposits that you're offering there or anything, have you, Gerard?
No. Jimmy, I was just inflating it to see whether it was you or Tristan that jumped in first.
There we go. All right. What's your betting strategy? Gentlemen, start with you, Gerard.
Jimmy, I like the Panthers to cover the line, and certainly my best of the week would be to cover 8.5. I took the 7.5 earlier in the week. I just thought under the key number of 8 was right. I still think that under 10 is where it looks, and I would not be surprised that we're looking at a high-scoring game here. I certainly do believe that we have points over. I mean, the number I'm working around is 30 to 14. So I've got the Panthers at 13. I've got the Eels at 30 to 14, a 16-point margin, a 44-point game. I think it's all about their defence. Even last week, under pressure in that first half, under the pump, they still went into half-time only conceding 12 points. It's been their average all year. They're the best defensive team. They're fresh. I think they're ready to peak. I think defence is the key. And then I think the 9 and the 7 lead the way. And the 1, he was absolutely outstanding last week. I'm sure he has a big game again. If I had to find somebody for the Clive Churchill, I thought $14 for Accor. I know he might be missing for the first 15 or so minutes. He was just instrumental in changing that game, straightening it up, finding yards in the middle. His direction of play and read of what he does is just so astute. $14 for the Clive Churchill. He would be my play as well. Tristan?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Gerard. I just think the Panthers are absolutely primed for a dominant display here. I think they've been the best side by a fair margin throughout the course of the year, and I think they're really going to assert their authority against a Parramatta side that's done phenomenally well to get to the big dance. But I think they were quite fortunate to get over the top of the Cowboys, and I think this is a completely different beast here. I think Penrith win. I think they win pretty comfortably, 13+. And I look at the Clive Churchill, and obviously Nathan Cleary is the standout, and you'd expect if they win, he's going to be very hard to beat. But just wouldn't surprise if Viliami Kikau, last game for the Panthers, bleached hairstyle, has a big game early, and puts his name up there in lights. It wouldn't surprise me at $26 if he has a sizable game.
Wasn't he a man on a mission last weekend?
Yeah, you forget that he's 6'7" and 122 kilos. Like, when he's throwing himself around so athletically, you have to remember that. Like, this is a big man that's doing that.
Mate, when the trainer was picking Graham up off the ground, he was also going back about 5 metres looking for a couple of his spare ribs. Yeah. I mean, that was one hell of a hit.
We're all singing from the same hymn sheet. -8.5 comfortably. I looked at 13+ at $2.36. I know $2.85, but everything points to Nathan, doesn't it? Because the Australian selectors are going to announce their Rugby League World Cup squad. If you get player of the match in the grand final, then you should then walk into the number 7 jersey. I think that's probably what they're going to do as well. I know no value at $2.85, but, win's a win. First try scorer, Isaac Tungo and Micah Sivo, both at $11. So you'll be looking at both of those guys. Tungo out on that left-hand side and Sivo on his left-hand side up against the Ferrari. The Fijian Mack truck up against the Forbes Ferrari. Doesn't sound too good for me. NRLW, I've been covering the games for the last couple of weeks. So I like the Knights at the -6, the $1.90. They are absolutely superstars. Tamika Upton, Millie Boyle, and this young girl, Jessie Southwell. She's a 17-year-old halfback. Heard Matty Johns talk about it the other day. He thinks she's the best footballer in Newcastle, which is just saying something, men's or women. She's a little star. But first try scorer, Tamika Upton, you offer $13, Tristan. I'm going to have a little piece of that too. So that would be mine for the NRLW. All right, lads, we need to get a tip for the racing this weekend as it hots up as we go into the spring.
Jimmy, let's go to race 6 at Randwick on Saturday. I'm sure the forecast is for a big downpour of rain Thursday, Friday, and still some more on Saturday. And if that doesn't give race 6 number 1 Fireburn in the Flight Stakes an absolute leg up, she just eats it wet. Her closing sectionals when running 5th last week in the Golden Rose was just absolutely outstanding. I can't believe we can get $3. I think she starts in the red on Saturday. So I'll have my 100 straight out, easy staking plan for you to follow, Jimmy. 100 on the $3 Fireburn. And I will mention for a few of the followers out there that there might be a horse in race 3, number 1 at Eagle Farm on Saturday that I might be out there cheering on as well.
What's the name of that horse?
That horse happens to be Plundering, Jimmy, but please don't have any money on it.
Oh, too late. Anyway, Tristan, have you got any other horses in your stable that you don't know might be running on Saturday?
Not that I'm aware of just now, but that doesn't write them off from actually lining up on Saturday. But no, I believe we're in the clear on Saturday. It just looks an absolutely fantastic day of racing, and I agree. I've been quite bullish on Fireburn over its first couple of runs this prep as well, at much bigger odds than what it is now, and obviously prime for this race. That go for Zugotcha that's in the same race as Fireburn, that was one of the biggest goes I've seen for a long time. So obviously now stepping up significantly in class and taking on some absolute superstars. So whether that's just had an impact on how the market has priced up Zugotcha, and as Gerard suggests, there'll be a big push for Fireburn as we get closer to the race day when the big boys step in. But yeah, I haven't got a selection at the moment, but I'm very keen for the races on the weekend.
I have. I don't know. Oh, don't be like that, Gerard. I can see you rolling your eyes on this one. Guess
Jimmy,
what?
as long as you stay away from Eagle Farm, I'll be fine.
Nah, all right. Here's the deal, right? We'll reach some sort of compromise for the first time this year. I will go with Randwick, race 6, number 1, Fireburn. My staking strategy, $100 on the nose, right? And I'll stay away from plundering. Are we okay with that?
So we're both on Fireburn.
Fireburn.
All in
Wow.
Fireburn. Wow.
All in Fireburn. The other one I did have a look at too, and Tristan, every time you come on the radio, I'm trying to think of who it is. He just keeps asking me, ask Tristan about Top Rank. Ask Tristan about Top Rank. So $4.20 in the Epsom, in from $6 too, out of the Annabelle Neesham stable as well, Gerard. I'm sticking with Fireburn, but just have a look at Top Rank.
Jimmy, the way it dropped on them in the last 150 to win that last start was just very impressive. The question might be on a wet track. It has won twice on soft ground. But gee, it looks an impressive horse, doesn't it?
Yeah. All right, lads. Well, that's it.
That is.
That's the season done and dusted.
We go into a grand final. We've got no lunch bets. We've had the same horse bet. We're all on the Panthers. Wow.
Yeah, how do we work that out? How do we make sure that we...
Well, the way I would have thought it gets worked out is it rolls back 1 week, and whoever had the most successful lunch bets in the prior week is deemed the champion of the season. That's how I would assume it works, but I'm sure you guys might think otherwise.
Mate,
well, I'll add one more angle. I'll roll forward 1 week. If Jimmy doesn't touch plundering, I'll kick 100 in next week. There we go.
You know, if I did back plundering, you'd find out after the event.
Yes, I would. I'll be ringing them all, Jimmy.
Very good. Hey, gents, it's been a fantastic, enjoyable season. Big congratulations and a huge thank you to Top Sport and all the contributions that you've made, Tristan, to pass it on clothing. It's been a whole heap of fun. I hope the listeners have enjoyed it. We thoroughly enjoyed our lunch. We're going to do it twice next year. We're going to do it once down in Sydney again, but we'll do it up in Brisbane for Magic Round as well. Everyone, enjoy your grand final. I'm sure you will. And stay safe in the off season. Thanks, Jen.
Well, and Jimmy, the really good news is that the AFL's just warming up. The Detroit Lions look like they're maybe going to win a few more games than we expected this year. Absolutely murdered one last weekend, which their coach took credit for. So we're going to be talking a little bit of NFL and racing and all things sport when we get into next week.
That is true. I actually don't have an NFL side now. I've dropped the Seattle Seahawks.
Lemonade Jim.
I'm in the market for a new side. I really.
You stick solid, don't you?
Oh, lemonade sandwich, mate.
Lemonade Jim.
Yeah, that's right. As I say to the kids, you'd love to rob a bank with me, wouldn't you? Give up straight away. And they say, Dad, why are you robbing banks? I said, don't worry about it, kids.
It's all a part of education, Jimmy.
That's exactly right. Enjoy your grand final weekend, boys.
Thanks,
Take
guys.
care, gentlemen.